Chapter 83. Breakthrough Not Here, Hephaestus hissed, pulling his hood up to cover his face as they navigated the labyrinthine back alleys of the industrial district. The workshop is 3 blocks away. Wait, Damien stopped, planting his feet firmly on the oil-stained cobblestones. Hephaestus turned, eyes wide with panic. What? We can't stop. The city guard will be swarming this sector looking for whoever knocked out those cadets. We aren't going to the workshop yet, Damien said calmly. We need an inn, somewhere quiet, somewhere with thick walls. An inn, Hephaestus sputtered. My father is dying. The current city is no different from a slave yard, and you want to sleep. Looking at him in disbelief, was this really the Voss family that his father had bragged so much about being reliable? Fortunately, Damien's next words solved his doubts. I don't want to sleep. His eyes darkened, the blue shifting to a turbulent mix of gold and black. I want to break through. He looked up at the looming smog that covered the sky. His mind flashed back to the text of The Hero Returns. In the original novel, the Dwarven Ark was a tragedy known as the Iron Tomb Incident. By the time the protagonist arrived here in the future, Ironforge had already fallen, Damien recalled, a chill running down his spine. Regent Thrain wasn't just a usurper. He had sold the kingdom to the Twilight Association and the Void Cult. They didn't just want the throne, they wanted the forges. They turned the city into a factory for mass-producing abyss steel, metal infused with the souls of the citizens. When Alaric finally liberated this place, it was a ghost town. King Durin was severely weakened and his kingdom lost. Hephaestus was dead. The secret of the mechas was only later fully produced by other dwarves in the continent, despite its breakthrough this year. Because of this, the dwarf army that joined the coalition back then was but remnants, and their mechs were substandard. Durin, because of the loss of his kingdom, although later cured, disappeared from the public eye, a shell of his former self. Damien clenched his fist. I changed the elf arc. I saved the princess. I can save this place too, but not with my current strength. He was currently a peak 3rd order, strong for his age, yes, but the regent would have 5th order guards, maybe even 6th. And if the Void Cult was involved, there would be curses and corruption magic that mere mana couldn't block. He needed to cross the threshold. He needed more power. Hephaestus, Damien said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Find us an inn. I need one night. Tomorrow morning I will help you save the city. But tonight I need to get stronger. Hephaestus looked at Damien. He saw the terrifying resolve in the human's eyes. It wasn't the look of a boy. It was the look of someone unwilling to meet his fate. Fine, the prince relented, slumping his shoulders. There's a place nearby, the Cog and Tankard. It's a dive bar for shift workers. No one asks questions there. It's exactly the place people like you need. Pointing to the 4 of them, Hephaestus wondered if his decision to trust them was right. The Cog and Tankard, room 4. The inn was exactly as promised, greasy, loud, and smelled of stale beer and machine oil. But the walls were reinforced stone, designed to block out the noise of the factories. Guard the door, Damien ordered his team. Isabel, Leona, Lyra, don't let anyone in. Understood, they chorused, sensing the shift in his mood. Damien entered the small room and sat cross-legged on the rough wooden bed. He took a deep breath, centering himself. He closed his eyes. 3rd order is accumulation. You fill the cup, I've done that, my cores are overflowing. 4th order is intent. He recalled Queen Eleanor's lesson in the sacred grove. Is your heart full of killing? Is it for protection? At the 4th order you must imbue your mana with your nature. Your moves must carry your will. Damien looked inward. He saw his dual core. On the left, the swirling abyssal black of the Voss family magic, cold, calculating, ruthless. On the right, the burning, arrogant son of the golden dragon aura, dominating, prideful, overwhelming. They were opposites, shadow and light, mage and knight. For the past 6 months he had forced them to coexist through brute force and the celestial life physique, but they weren't united. What is my intent? Damien asked himself. Do I want to save the world? No, that's just a job. Do I want to protect my family? Yes, but that's not the route. He thought about his past life as Lin Ye, the powerless orphan, the boy who died reading a bad ending because he had no control over the story. He thought about this life, the wealth, the power, the fear people felt when they heard the name Voss. He liked it. He didn't just want to survive. He wanted to thrive. He wanted to take the plot, the treasures, the secret techniques, and the wafers and keep them all. He didn't want to choose between shadow and light. He wanted both. I am not a hero, Damien smiled in the darkness of his mind. Heroes sacrifice. And I am not a villain, he thought. Villains lose. I am the king, and a king takes everything. His intent crystallized. Greed. Not the petty greed for gold coins, but the metaphysical greed for everything. The absolute refusal to let go of anything that belonged to him. The desire to own the world, the story, and the destiny itself. My intent is possession, Damien whispered. I own the shadow, I own the light, I own my destiny. Boom! Inside his soul, the barrier shattered. The two warring energies in his chest stopped fighting. They submitted. The black mana didn't dilute the gold. It wrapped around it like a velvet cloak around a crown. The gold didn't burn away the shadow. It illuminated it, giving it form. But then a chain reaction occurred. The massive amount of willpower he had cultivated, from resisting Baylor's intent, from enduring the system's edits, surged into the newly formed core. Click! It felt like a lock snapping open in his brain. His will didn't just direct the mana anymore. It spilled out. It became tangible. Crack, crack. The wooden bed beneath him splintered. The air in the room grew heavy, dense with a terrifying gravity that wasn't magic. It was pure presence. System alert. Breakthrough detected. Intent manifested, the greedy king. Ascension to fourth order successful. Trait awakened, will materialization low level. Description: your will is no longer abstract. It can form a protective will armament over your soul and body, significantly increasing defense and physical strength. At high levels, it can crush the minds of weaker beings. Trait awakened, king's greed. Description: the greedy king does not only use his own power. You can temporarily borrow the intent of those you have defeated or contracted, overlaying their nature onto your attacks. Damien opened his eyes. The room was dark, but he could see every grain of dust in the air. He raised his hand. He didn't call on mana, he called on his will. Voom! A translucent, distorting layer of energy coated his skin. It looked like heat haze, but it felt harder than steel. Will armament, Damien whispered. It protects me from physical attacks, but more importantly, it protects me from other intents. Baylor's pressure won't work on me anymore. He stood up. He didn't rush out immediately. He sat down on the only sturdy chair in the room. He needed to think. I'm fourth order now. With my dual core and these new traits, I can fight fifth orders head-on. But brute force isn't enough for what comes next. He pulled out a notebook from his void gem. Timeline check, year 2025. The protagonist, Alaric, has just been born. He is currently a crying baby in a remote village. I have 16 years before he enters the academy. Damien began to write. The Dwarf Kingdom current. Secure the alliance. Cure the king. Crucial, get the blueprints for the Magitech Guardians, mechs. If I can combine dwarven engineering with Barnaby's business acumen, I can revolutionize the world's technology. Gold, cars, airships, and heavy weapons. I need to modernize the Black Thread's arsenal. The search for Thuron. King Durin was a former party member of Thuron's. He might have clues. The dragon lands in the west. That's where the clue usually leads in these stories. I need to go there next. The Academy City. In a few years, I need to head to the central continent. I will enter the academy not as a student, but as a teacher. I will raise a generation of monsters before the protagonist, Alaric, even enrolls. 16 years, Damien muttered, closing the book. It sounds like a long time, but with the void demon god and the heavenly demon lord watching, it's nothing. He stood up, adjusting his coat. The faint distortion layer of his will armament settled over his shoulders like an invisible mantle of royalty. He walked to the door and flung it open. A day had passed, and it was time for him to go out. Fortunately, everyone was already outside waiting for him to return. Hephaestus was packing in the hallway. Isabel, Leona, and Lyra were leaning against the wall. And as the door opened, a wave of unseen pressure washed over them. Hephaestus stumbled back, his knees buckling. He grabbed the wall for support, his face pale. What is that pressure? Is there a gravity spell? Even Isabel felt a chill. It wasn't mana. It felt like standing in front of a predator. No spell, Damien smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. It's my intent. He retracted the pressure, allowing the prince to breathe. Prince Hephaestus, Damien said, his voice carrying a weight that made the dwarf straighten his spine instinctively. Grab your tools. We're going to the palace. Now, Hephaestus stammered, wiping sweat from his brow. But it's the middle of the night. Exactly, Damien's eyes flashed with predatory gold. The best time to rob a thief is when he thinks he's safe in his own house. Let's go see exactly what your uncle is up to. Streets of the upper district were cleaner than the slums, but they were just as oppressive. Here, the smog didn't smell like sewage. It smelled like ozone and burning mana. Patrols of iron golems marched in perfect synchronization, their heavy metal feet clanking against the brass-plated roads. Hephaestus led them through the shadows of the massive ventilation ducts, moving with a familiarity that spoke of a childhood spent sneaking out of the palace. Suddenly, the prince stopped. He turned around, his grease-stained face illuminated by the flickering light of a nearby mana lamp. He held a heavy wrench in his hand, gripping it tight. Stop, Hephaestus said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was hard. Damien paused, his new will armament humming silently under his skin. We don't have time for sightseeing, Prince. I'm not sightseeing. Hephaestus took a step forward, looking up at the much taller human. I am clarifying something. The dwarf pointed his wrench at Damien's chest. I am taking you to the king because you are a Voss. My father respected Thuron Voss more than any dwarf in this mountain. He said your father was the only human who understood the weight of responsibility. Hephaestus's eyes narrowed behind his goggles. That is the only reason I am trusting you, but listen to me closely, human. The prince's hand trembled, not from fear, but from a desperate, suicidal resolve. If I find out you are lying, if I find out you are using my father's condition to steal our technology or hurt my people, I won't fight you. Hephaestus tapped a small, glowing red button on his belt. I have rigged the thermal exhaust ports of the city. One signal, and I overload the magma flow. I will blow this entire capital into the sky before I let a traitor sit on the throne. I plan to use it against my uncle if things really came down to it, but I won't be afraid to use it against you. Damien looked at the prince. He looked at the red button. Then he smiled. It wasn't a mocking smile. It was a smile of approval. Good, Damien said. A king needs to be willing to burn the board to save the pieces. I respect that. He gently pushed the wrench aside. But you won't need to push that button. Even if you don't believe in us, believe in your father's judgment. Since he respects my father so much, how could I, his son, be so bad? After all, a tiger dad does not give birth to a dog son, haha. Laughing slightly, Damien patted Hephaestus on his shoulder. For this talented person who had died in the original story, Damien didn't mind saving him. However, Hephaestus, hearing this laugh, didn't immediately reply. Rather, he held his gaze for a second longer, then deactivated the trigger and turned around, exhaling sharply. "Follow me, the service tunnel is this way." As they moved deeper into the district, the atmosphere grew more hostile. Even in the shadows, Damien could see the propaganda posters plastered on the walls. They depicted humans as rats stealing dwarven gold. There were caricatures of elves with knives, stabbing dwarves in the back. "I understand the caution," Damien whispered, keeping his hood low. "But this is hatred. Why is the anti-human sentiment so high, especially considering my father's and yours relationship?" "Things weren't always like this. They were better before," Hephaestus muttered, kicking a piece of trash. "Before what?" "Before the Elven War started." Hephaestus stopped at a heavy iron grate. He began to unscrew the bolts with rapid, practiced movements. 6 months ago, when the Twilight Association attacked the Elven Forest, my father knew. "He knew," Damien raised an eyebrow. "We have spies too," Hephaestus grunted, prying the grate open. "When the news reached us that the humans were sieging the Elven capital, father was furious. He slammed his fist on the war table so hard he cracked the stone." Flashback. The royal war room, 6 months ago. King Durin, a massive dwarf with a beard like braided iron, stood roaring at his generals. "The elves are our oldest neighbors. If the humans take the forest, they control the mana flow of the entire continent. We march at dawn, prepare the legions." The generals hesitated, "But sire, the treaty." "Screw the treaty," Durin bellowed. "Thuron Voss is missing. The emperor is silent. This smells of rot. If we sit still, we'll probably be next." And so that night, in preparation for the war, there was a feast to bless the departing army. Durin drank from his favorite tankard. He laughed. He boasted never to wake till this moment. Flashback end. "He never woke up," Hephaestus said, his voice thick with suppressed emotion as they crawled into the tunnel. "The healers couldn't find a cause. They said it was mana exhaustion. But the next day, the attacks started." "Attacks?" Damien asked. "Human mercenaries," Hephaestus said. "They started raiding our border convoys. They burned our grain shipments. They poisoned our wells. Every time they attacked, they shouted, 'For the glory of humanity.'" A false flag operation, Damien realized instantly. Classic. "It worked," Hephaestus said bitterly. "The people were scared, they were hungry, and then my uncle stepped in." "Regent Thrain," Damien stated. "He appeared like a savior," Hephaestus spat. "He gave speeches about dwarven supremacy. He said the humans had betrayed us. He said the elves were weak for falling. He closed the borders. He militarized the police. He told everyone that the only way to survive was to hate the outsiders." Hephaestus looked back at Damien. "And now, everyone believes that humans are the source of all our misery. If the guards find you, they won't arrest you. The mob will tear you apart before you even reach a cell." Damien nodded slowly. The puzzle pieces fell into place. The Twilight Association and the Void Cult were thorough. Neutralize the strongest threats. Thuron Voss ambushed, King Durin poisoned. Isolate the races. Make the dwarves hate the humans so they wouldn't send aid during the Elven War. Install a puppet, Thrain. "Your uncle isn't a savior, Hephaestus," Damien said coldly, his blue eyes glowing in the dark tunnel. "He's a puppet. He isolated the kingdom, and just like your father feared, the dwarves are most likely the next target after the elves. At this rate, It seems their plan to weaken the whole Elias before the demon invasion seems to be working. Muttering slowly, Damien's eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed he had to speed up his plans. Demon invasion, Hephaestus froze. I'll explain later, Damien said, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. We're here. They climbed out of the ventilation shaft. They were standing on a high balcony, hidden by gargoyles. Below them stretched the royal palace gardens, but there were no flowers. The gardens had been paved over. In their place were rows of tanks, artillery cannons, and strange, green-glowing forges that smelled of rotten meat. Dominating the center of the complex was the palace itself, a massive fortress made of black iron. "The lion's den," Leona growled, her fur bristling at the smell of the dark mana wafting from the forges. "Let's go," Damien adjusted his collar, his king's will settling over his shoulders like an invisible cloak. Time to find out what exactly is going on. Down. Entering the royal garden, Damien pressed his hand onto Hephaestus's shoulder, forcing the prince into a crouch behind a massive stone gargoyle. Behind them, Isabel and the others followed suit, masking their figure behind the stone statue. In an instant, the wool armament shimmering over Damien's skin expanded slightly, wrapping around the group like a camouflage blanket. It didn't make them invisible, but it twisted the light and sound around them, blending them into the smog. They were perched on a high-maintenance catwalk, overlooking the royal foundry. But it didn't look like a foundry anymore. It looked like a graveyard for giants. Below them, suspended by massive chains and surrounded by scaffolding, were 3 colossal, humanoid metal frames. They stood 50 feet tall, made of gleaming mithril and black iron. Giant mechanical golems, mechas. "By the gods," Leona whispered, her eyes wide. "What are those?" "Project Guardian," Hephaestus whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of pride and horror. "My life's work. They were supposed to be protectors, defenders of the mountain, but they aren't finished. The neural link cores aren't installed." "Quiet," Damien hissed. "Someone is coming." Below, on the factory floor, a group of figures walked beneath the towering legs of the central mech. 2 wore the crimson-trimmed robes of the Twilight Association. One was a high-ranking dwarven general with eyes that glowed with a faint, unnatural green light, a thrall. "Report," the Twilight cultist rasped. "The Master grows impatient. When will the Titans walk?" "We are stalled," the general replied, his voice flat and robotic. "The chassis are complete, the weapon systems are online, but the synchronization rate is 0%. Without the neural link, they are just statues. Can't your engineers bypass it?" "We tried," the general said. 3 engineers burned their brains out trying to hotwire the core. The encryption is too complex. Only the chief artificer understands the architecture. The cultist slammed his staff against the metal railing. "The prince," he spat. "We need Hephaestus." "He has been elusive," the general admitted. "But he cannot hide forever. The regent has ordered a city-wide sweep. We do not need him willing, we just need his mind." "Capture him," the cultist ordered. "Drag him back here. Chain him to the control interface. Flay him if you have to, but force him to finish the calibration. The Iron Legion launches in 3 days. These guardians must lead the vanguard. If we have these titans," the cultist looked up at the looming metal giant with a greedy hunger, "we will not just conquer the human empire. We will crush the Holy Church and the dragons alike." On the catwalk, Hephaestus was hyperventilating. He slumped against the wall, clutching his wrench to his chest. They want to twist it," Hephaestus gasped. "They want to turn my guardians into slaughter machines. If those things launch, nothing can stop them. A single guardian has the firepower of a 6th-order mage." Damien looked at the massive machines. He saw the potential. In the original novel, these machines, Even especially the future version with all kinds of upgrades made them truly a force to be reckoned with. This is the power I need, Damien thought. The power to fight armies. Hephaestus, Damien grabbed the prince's shoulder, shaking him out of his panic. Listen to me. They can't finish them without you. That gives us leverage. Leverage? Hephaestus looked at him with wild eyes. They are going to lobotomize me and turn me into a battery. I have to destroy the blueprints. I have to blow up the factory. He reached for the detonator on his belt. Don't be an idiot, Damien stopped his hand. If you blow it up, they will just rebuild it eventually, and they will kill everyone in the city to punish you. Then what do I do? Hephaestus cried softly. I can't go back to my workshop. They'll be waiting. I can't go to the palace. Hephaestus looked at the unfinished Gundams. He felt the weight of his own genius crushing him. He needed guidance. He needed someone who understood the soul of a machine better than he did. Then he remembered. There is one person, Hephaestus muttered, a desperate hope lighting his eyes. My father's oldest friend, the former royal artificer. Former, Damien asked. Grandmaster Brock, Hephaestus nodded. He was the one who taught me the basics of golemancy. My uncle fired him the day he took power. Thrain called him a senile relic and kicked him out of the guild. Brock lives in the scrapyard district now, in an old, dilapidated clock tower. He always told me that if the gears ever stopped turning, I should come to him. Hephaestus looked at Damien. He hates the regent, he hates the cult, and he has a hidden forge that isn't on the city grid. If we can get there, we can hide. And maybe he can help us figure out how to steal the Guardians back. Damien smirked. A disgruntled, exiled genius living in a scrapyard. That was a classic RPG trope, and usually those NPCs gave the best upgrades. Lead the way, Prince, Damien said, standing up and pulling his cloak tight. Let's go pay this relic a visit. The scrapyard district. If the industrial district was a prison, the scrapyard was a mechanical graveyard. Mountains of rusted gears, broken pipes, and discarded golem parts towered over the narrow, muddy streets like metal skeletons. The smog here was so thick you could taste the rust. It was dark, silent, and eerie. Hephaestus led them through the maze of junk to a leaning, dilapidated tower made of mismatched metal plates and stone. A massive broken clock face hung from the top, frozen at midnight. This is it, Hephaestus whispered, the old clock tower. There were no guards, no lights, just a heavy iron door with no handle and no keyhole. Hephaestus walked up to it, but he didn't knock. Instead, he pulled out his wrench and tapped a specific, rhythmic code on a rusted bolt head near the frame. Clank, 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 clank. Silence. Then a hidden panel slid open in the center of the door. A single, mechanical eye, a literal camera lens glowing with blue mana, extended out on a brass stalk. It whirred, focusing on Hephaestus. Who disturbs my rust? A grumpy, gravelly voice echoed from a hidden speaker. I don't buy scrap after dark, piss off. Master Brock, Hephaestus hissed, looking over his shoulder nervously. It's me, Hephaestus. The eye zoomed in, the lens aperture contracting. The prince, the voice scoffed, dripping with sarcasm. What are you doing in the trash heap, boy? Did you finally realize that the regent's new order is just a fancy word for tyranny? Or did you break your toy again? Uncle Thrain is trying to capture me, Hephaestus blurted out, his voice cracking. They want to force me to finish the Guardian project. They want to use the Titans for war. The mechanical eye paused. It swiveled instantly to Damien, Leona, and the others standing in the shadows. And you brought humans. The voice dropped an octave, becoming dangerous. You brought outsiders to my sanctuary. Are you trying to get me killed, boy? They're Voss, Hephaestus shouted, playing his trump card. It's Thuron's son, he saved me. Silence. The mechanical eye extended further, hovering inches from Damien's face. A beam of blue light scanned him, analyzing his bone structure, his mana signature, and his silver hair. Thuron Spawn, the voice muttered, sounding grudgingly impressed. He has the same arrogant eyes, and HMPH, he smells like trouble. Clunk hiss. The sound of heavy pneumatic locks disengaging echoed from inside the door. Gears ground together as the massive slab of iron slowly swung inward, revealing a warm, cluttered workshop filled with the ticking of 1,000 clocks. "Get in," Brock's voice grumbled. "Before you let the smog in, also wipe your feet. I just swept the oil." Damien stepped inside, looking around at the walls covered in blueprints and half-finished automatons. "Charming fellow," Damien noted. "He's the best smith in the world," Hephaestus said, stepping inside and sighing in relief. "And right now, he's the only one who can help us hack the Guardian project." Inside the clock tower, the air was warm and smelled of cedar, oil, and ozone. The walls were lined with thousands of ticking clocks, creating a rhythmic, hypnotic hum that seemed to mask any conversation from the outside world. Grandmaster Brock hobbled over to a workbench, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. He didn't offer them tea. He offered them a glare. "So," Brock grunted, his mechanical eyes zooming in on Damien with a whir, "you're the human who made a scene at the gate." "News travels fast," Damien noted, leaning against a stack of gears, his will armament humming faintly to shield him from the ambient mana pressure of the workshop. "I have taps on the border gate scanners," Brock tapped his metal temple. "I heard the audio log. The prince asked if you could hold a wrench." Brock spat into a metal bucket. "But holding a wrench doesn't make you an engineer, boy. Do you even know what an artificer is?" He picked up a small, lifeless mechanical bird from the table and held it up. "In the human lands, you categorize power into combat and support. You think blacksmiths just hit metal and alchemists just mix potions, but the dwarves know better." Eyes gleamed with a fanatic pride. "A blacksmith forges the body, an alchemist brews the fuel, but an artificer, we breathe the soul." He injected a tiny pulse of mana into the bird. It didn't just move, it snapped to life, chirping and fluttering its wings with a fluidity that looked alive. "We bridge the gap between mana and machine," said reverently. "That is the Guardian project." He walked over to a massive schematic pinned to the wall. It was a blueprint of the Titan mech, covered in red ink and complex equations. "Hephaestus here," gestured to the prince. "He didn't just build a big golem. He created the neural link. It allows a pilot to transfer their intent into the machine. The machine becomes a second body, a suit of armor that hits with the force of a sixth-order spell." "But without the prince to calibrate the link," finished, looking at the blueprint. "The machine rejects the pilot. It becomes a tomb." "Exactly," grunted. "That's why Thrain needs him, and that's why we're in deep shit." Slammed his hand on the table. "I can help you open the back doors to the factory. I can help you hijack the Guardians. But I can't do it alone. I'm old, my hands shake, and I don't have the manpower." "Fortunately, there's hope." "Or do you think I'm the only one Thrain fired?" scoffed. "Thrain is a politician. He doesn't know a piston from a privy. To build his Iron Legion and those cursed abyss steel weapons, he needs the guild masters." Mechanical eye whirred angrily, projecting a hologram of 3 dwarves onto the table. "Master of the blast furnace, mistress of the rune scribes, general of the heavy infantry, none of them bowed to that damn usurper. None of them agreed to put souls into metal." "So he killed them?" asked, her voice low. "Worse," growled, "he buried them." He pulled a lever on the wall. A map of the city descended from the ceiling. He pointed to a dark, isolated sector deep beneath the earth, far below even the scrapyard. "The Deep Iron Prison," said. "It's a maximum security dungeon built into the magma vents. Thrain locked up 30 of the king's most loyal subjects there, the best smiths, the toughest soldiers, the engineers. Turn 2, his gaze sharp. You want my help, you want to stop the cultists. Then I have a condition, you help me break them out. If you get them back, if you break them out of that hellhole, then we don't just hack the project. Grin revealed a row of gold teeth. We steal the whole damn factory. We use the loyalists to build an army right under Thrain's nose. Looked at the map. A prison break in a hostile city deep underground. It was high risk. But the reward? An instant army of elite craftsmen and warriors loyal to the true king. In the timeline, asked. 1 month, Hephaestus spoke up, his face pale but determined. My uncle, he has scheduled his official coronation in 30 days. He plans to unveil the Iron Legion and execute my father on the same day to symbolize the transition of power. As for the current search, even if they plan to launch the Iron Army in 3 days, as long as they don't find me, they'll have to wait. 30 days, mused, that's tight. But it's enough. Eyes gleamed like a gamer accepting a hidden quest. He looked at his team. We have 1 month to turn this scrapyard into a fortress. We break into the prison. We free the loyalists. We use workshop to arm them and us with weapons the regent has never seen. Slammed his hand onto the map, right over the royal palace. And on the day of the coronation, when Thrain puts that crown on his head, we'll knock it off. Laughed, it was a rusty barking sound. I like this human. Like his father, he's quite bold. Threw a heavy ring of keys to Hephaestus. Open up the back storage, boy. If we're going to start a revolution, we're going to need materials. And you. Pointed a grease-stained finger at. If you can get my friends out alive, I'll build you anything you want, cannons, airships, you name it. I'll hold you to that, smirked. He turned to Isabel, Lyra, and Isabel, you're on crowd control. You're the battering ram. Lyra, find us a vantage point. Adjusted his cloak, his will armament shimmering invisibly around him. Guess it's time to test my new strength after breaking. Next. Guess it's time to test my new strength after breaking through. Cracked his knuckles, the golden aura flaring around his fists. He turned toward the door, ready to march out. Hold your horses, boy, grunted, slamming his wrench onto the metal table. You think you can just waltz into the deep iron prison through the front door? That isn't bravery, that's suicide. Grabbed the lever on the wall and pulled it down harder. Clanked WHIRR. The map of the city that hung from the ceiling zoomed in, focusing on the dark, jagged sector buried deep beneath the earth. It wasn't just a dungeon. It was a labyrinth built inside the active veins of the volcano. Look here, pointed a grease-stained finger at the main entrance. The main gate. It's guarded by 2 battalions of the Iron Legion and a 5th Order mana barrier. If you attack here, the alarm goes off, and the regent vents the cells with poison gas. My friends die before you even swing your sword. Frowned, his aura settling down. So a frontal assault is out. What about the sewers? Melted, Hephaestus spoke up, his voice grim. The drainage system down there flows with molten slag, not water. Then how do we get in? Asked, crossing her massive arms. Tapped a thin, jagged line on the map that looked like a crack in the foundation. The geothermal intake shaft, said. It's an old ventilation system from the First Era. It bypasses the main gate and drops you right into the magma sector. Why isn't it guarded? Lyra asked, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. Because it's hell, said bluntly. The air temperature down there is 400 degrees. The tunnels are infested with magma slimes, and the pressure is high enough to crush a normal dwarf. He looked at. Thrain didn't bother guarding it because he thinks nothing can survive the descent. Perfect, smirked. I love that people think are impossible. He looked at the map, analyzing the layout. The The shaft led to a central junction at the very bottom. Once we hit the bottom, pointed to the junction, we split up. Team A, he pointed to the left path leading to the holding cells. Lyra Isabel, your job is to make noise, hit the cell block, free the prisoners, start a riot. Team B, he pointed to the right path, a dark tunnel marked condemned sector. Hephaestus and I, we go into the old sector. Wait, Hephaestus leaned in, squinting at the map. His eyes widened as he recognized a specific rune etched over the right sector. That symbol, the twin hammers, Hephaestus whispered, his voice trembling slightly. Is this the royal vault? I nodded gravely. The old king's private workshop. Hephaestus looked at, a sudden intensity in his eyes. We have to go there, my father. Before he fell ill, he told me he hid something down there. A weapon he couldn't finish. He called it Pantheon. Pantheon raised an eyebrow. The sword of all elements, grunted, crossing his arms. Wanted to forge a blade that could channel every type of mana simultaneously, but it was unstable. It sucked energy like a black hole. He hid it away because he was afraid it would blow up the city. A sword that eats energy. Eyes lit up with the greedy light of a collector. That sounded perfect for his dual-core instability. Is it still there? It should be, Hephaestus nodded. If Thrain hasn't found the key, if we can get that sword, it might be the only thing strong enough to pierce the warden's armor. Then it's decided, declared. We retrieve the sword and we stop the transport train carrying the civilians. Good, grunted. He walked over to a heavy iron chest and kicked it open. Now that you know the plan, put these on. You can't fight if you're cooked. He tossed a handful of strange, metallic discs onto the workbench. They looked like oversized platinum coins, etched with glowing blue runes that hummed with a faint, cooling mist. Thermal regulators, Brock explained. These generate a localized frost shield around your skin. It won't stop a fireball, but it will keep your blood from boiling in the vents. Damien caught one, feeling the instant drop in temperature against his palm. He attached it to his belt. Click. A refreshing, invisible chill wrapped around his body. And you'll need these. Brock walked to the weapon rack. He tossed a pair of bulky, brass knuckles to Leona. They were fitted with exhaust pipes. Steam impact gauntlets. Since you rely on brute force, these use the ambient heat of the vents to pressurize your punches. Hit something hard enough, and it releases a steam explosion. Leona's eyes lit up. She slid them on. Clank. I like them. Next, Brock handed Lyra a quiver of black arrows. Flashbang arrows. They don't cut, they scream. Use them to blind the sensors or deafen the guards in the equi-tunnels. Finally, Brock turned to Hephaestus. He handed the prince a heavy, rusted iron keycard. This is the master override for the old sector, Brock said softly. Your father gave it to me for safekeeping. It should open the vault. Hephaestus took it, his hand clutching it tight. I won't fail him. All right, Damien said, pulling his hood up. Is everyone ready? Ready. Brock pulled a second lever. Hiss clank. A section of the workshop floor hissed and slid open, revealing a dark, vertical shaft leading straight down into the earth. A blast of sulphurous hot air rushed up, making the clocks on the wall rattle. The red glow of magma was visible miles down. Into the furnace, Damien whispered. He jumped. Oh, yeah. The descent 300 meters down. They rappelled down the shaft using mana-reinforced ropes. The heat rose with every meter. The walls turned from cold stone to hot, glowing red rock. Splat! A glob of molten lava dripped from a pipe, landing on Damien's shoulder. The thermal regulator flared blue, hissing as it neutralized the heat. Movement, Lyra whispered from above. 3 o'clock inside the vent. Damien looked. A massive, red gelatinous blob was oozing out of a side pipe. It radiated heat so intense the air shimmered around it. Magma slime tier 3. It didn't have eyes, but it sensed them. It lunged, shooting a stream of liquid fire at Leona. Leona tried to dodge, swinging on her rope, but the heat wave singed her fur. It's too hot to fight. My aura is being suppressed. Isabel, Damien shouted. You're up. Remember what Alfred taught you. Isabel was hanging below him. Unlike the others, she wasn't sweating. Her eyes were glowing a vibrant ruby red. To her, the oppressive heat didn't feel like hell. It felt like a buffet. Yes, young master. Isabel let go of her rope. She dropped through the air, falling straight toward the magma slime. She opened her mouth and inhaled. Gluttony art heat eater. Whoosh! The stream of fire that the slime shot at her didn't burn her. It was sucked into her mouth like noodles. She landed on the slime's back. Her hands ignited with blue fire, hotter than the magma. Delicious, Isabel laughed a manic sound. More. She punched the slime. The blue fire consumed the red magma body instantly. The slime shrieked, a sound like boiling water, and evaporated into steam. Show off, Leona grumbled, though she looked relieved. 10 minutes later, their boots hit the metal grating at the bottom of the shaft. They were in a massive junction room. To the left, a heavy blast door led to the cell block. To the right, a dark, narrow tunnel marked with authorized personnel only led to the old sector. This is it, Brock said, checking his mana rifle. The split. Good luck, Damien nodded to the Grandmaster. Give them hell. I intend to, Brock grinned. The teams separated. The jailbreak had begun, clang, hiss. The heavy metal blast door slammed shut behind them, sealing off the roar of the magma vents and the distant sounds of Brock's team heading left. Silence descended instantly. Unlike the main shaft, which was alive with the sound of steam and monsters, the old sector was dead quiet. The air here was stale, smelling of rust, ozone, and ancient dust that hadn't been disturbed in centuries. Lumos, Hephaestus whispered, tapping a crystal on his shoulder. A beam of pale yellow light cut through the absolute darkness, illuminating a long, cylindrical tunnel lined with rusted pipes and massive, dormant cables that hung like dead snakes from the ceiling. This way, the prince whispered, his voice trembling slightly as he checked the map. The royal vault is 3 kilometers deep. We have to follow the main conduit. Damien walked beside him, his shadow sense fully expanded. The darkness here felt different, heavier, older. Relax, Prince, Damien said, his voice calm but low. Your heart is beating so loud it's echoing off the walls. You're an artificer, not a rogue. Panic is useless here. I can't help it, Hephaestus admitted, gripping his wrench until his knuckles turned white. This place, it's a graveyard. My ancestors dug these tunnels during the era of the old kings to mine star metal, but they dug too deep. They found things, voids in the earth that drove miners mad. Hephaestus shined his light on the wall. Deep claw marks, centuries old and etched into reinforced steel plating, were visible under the dust. That's why King Durin sealed this sector, Hephaestus swallowed hard, and why he hid the Pantheon sword here. He figured that if anyone was crazy enough to come down here to steal it, the tunnel ghosts would get them first. Ghosts don't scare me, Damien said, brushing his hand over the claw marks. I'm more worried about the living. He pointed to the floor. Amidst the thick layer of dust there were tracks, fresh tracks. They weren't footprints. They were deep grooves, like a heavy cart or a sled had been dragged through recently. Someone has been using this tunnel, Damien noted grimly, and recently. Hephaestus paled. But that's impossible. Only my father and Brock had the key card, unless Thrain cracked the code. Or unless he found a different way in, Damien said. Let's move, quietly. The runic gate. They moved deeper, navigating the maze of pipes. 20 minutes later, they reached a dead end. A massive circular door, made of solid mithril and inscribed with thousands of complex, glowing runes blocked the path. There was no keyhole, only a chaotic spinning interface of mana rings in the center. The cipher gate, Hephaestus breathed, stepping forward. My father designed this lock himself. It creates a random mana equation every 10 seconds. If you don't solve it in time, the door releases a mana pulse that liquefies your brain. Hephaestus pulled out the rusted iron keycard Brock had given him. He tried to insert it into a slot on the side. Bzzzt. Red light flashed. The gate didn't open. The mana ring spun faster, glowing an angry orange. It's not working, Hephaestus panicked, fumbling with the card. The code has been changed. Thrain must have reset the sequence. Time? Damien asked, looking at the spinning rings. 20 seconds, Hephaestus stammered, sweat pouring down his grease-stained face. I can't hack a royal cipher in 20 seconds. It takes a team of scribes days to calculate the variable. You don't have days, Damien cut him off, placing a hand on the prince's shoulder. He didn't use force, he used King's will. A calm, heavy pressure washed over Hephaestus, suppressing his panic instinctively. Listen to me, Damien said, his voice absolute. You are the chief artificer. You built the neural link. You built the Gundams. This is just a lock. You are smarter than the lock. Damien pointed at the spinning rings. Don't calculate it, feel it. Use your mana to find the friction point. Hephaestus took a deep breath. The panic receded, replaced by the cold, analytical focus of an engineer. Friction point, Hephaestus muttered. He closed his eyes. He placed his grease-stained hands on the mithril surface. He didn't try to do the math. He pushed his mana into the mechanism. He felt the flow. He felt the tumblers spinning against the mana current. Click. He found the rhythm. Gotcha, Hephaestus whispered. He twisted his wrist, sending a precise pulse of mana counterclockwise against the spin. Clunk hiss. The orange light turned green. The spinning rings locked into place. The massive door groaned and split down the middle, sliding open. I did it, Hephaestus gasped, wiping sweat from his eyes. I bypassed a royal cipher. Good job, Damien patted his back. Now let's see what Thrain was hiding. The transport hub. They stepped through the gate. They expected to find a vault. Instead, they found themselves on a high-maintenance balcony overlooking a massive, hollowed-out cavern. And what they saw made Hephaestus freeze in horror. Below them, suspended over a pit of churning violet mana, was a massive Magitech rail system. A train, black and jagged like a spine, was sitting on the tracks, but it wasn't carrying ore. It wasn't carrying weapons. The cargo cars were open cages. Inside them, huddled together in the cold dark, were hundreds of dwarves, not soldiers, civilians. Elderly dwarves with gray beards, women clutching bundles of cloth, and children. Dozens of children. No, Hephaestus whispered, gripping the railing so hard the metal bent. Among the children in the nearest cage, huddled against the bars, was a familiar face. The boy Damien had given a gold coin to in the alleyway, Thorn. He was clutching his broken mechanical toy, shivering as a construct guard walked past the cage, banging its baton against the bars. What is this? Hephaestus's voice cracked. Where are they taking them? Damien looked at the far end of the track. The rails led into a massive, ominous machine that pulsed with a sickening purple light. It looked like a furnace, but instead of smoke, it vented screams. The soul extractor. They aren't prisoners, Hephaestus, Damien said, his voice cold as the grave. They are fuel. Hephaestus stared at the machine. He stared at the children. Fuel. The Guardians need souls to run without a pilot, Damien explained brutally. If Thrain can't use you to calibrate the neural link, he's going to brute force it, by burning thousands of weak souls to mimic the power of one strong one. Judging from the current situation and knowledge he had about cults, Damien had already deduced the current situation. Thinking about it, he couldn't help but feel his stomach retch. Hephaestus trembled, the wrench in his hand shook. He's going to mulch them. Whoosh! Suddenly, the air in the cavern shimmered. A massive holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the loading platform below. It was a giant blue image of Regent Thrain, sitting on the throne in the upper city. He looked bored, swirling a goblet of wine. "Report," the regent's amplified voice boomed through the cavern. A cultist on the platform bowed to the hologram. "Regent, the shipment is loaded. We have 300 units of biofuel, mostly elder stock and youth stock." "Good," Thrain's hologram sneered, looking down at the cages with utter indifference. "Are the batteries ready? My Titan is hungry. These volunteers should provide enough soul power for the initial startup." "Yes, my lord," the cultist replied. "The children yield the purest energy. Processing will begin in 10 minutes. "Excellent. Initiate the extraction sequence. I want the Iron Legion fully powered before the coronation." The hologram flickered off. On the balcony, Hephaestus wasn't shaking anymore. He stood up straight. He adjusted his goggles. "Damien," Hephaestus said. His voice sounded different. The fear was gone. "Yes." "The sword," Hephaestus said, looking at the distant door on the far side of the cavern where the Pantheon sword was located. "If we go for the sword now, we can get it." "Yes," Damien nodded slowly. "We can sneak past this. We can get the sword, escape, and win the war later." "But if we do that," Hephaestus pointed his wrench at the train below, "that train leaves in 10 minutes. Those kids die." Damien looked at the prince. He didn't answer, he waited. Hephaestus looked at Damien. "You said you're Voss. I doubt your father would allow such a thing happen in front of him." Hephaestus slammed his visor down. "And I am a prince of the Ironclan, and I don't let my people become batteries." Hephaestus turned away from the vault door. He looked down at the platform teeming with cultists and cyborgs. "Screw the sword," Hephaestus growled. "We're saving the kids." Damien smiled. It was a genuine smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." Damien drew his sword, he brought from the Elf Empire. "Let's derail a train." "Next." "We have to stop it," Hephaestus breathed, gripping the railing. "But how?" Damien looked at the massive engine below. Steam hissed from its vents, and the wheels were already beginning to screech against the metal. "You tell me," Damien said, stepping back to let the expert look. "You built this city. How do we kill that train?" Hephaestus adjusted his goggles, his eyes scanning the glowing blue tracks and the heavy iron locomotive with frantic precision. "It's a maglev induction engine," Hephaestus muttered, his mind racing through schematics. "It doesn't just roll, it floats on a magnetic field generated by those blue coils on the track. Once it hits the acceleration tunnel, it locks into a vacuum seal. If we try to stop it then, the G-force will liquefy everyone inside." "So we stop it now," Damien said. "What's the weak point?" "The coupling." Hephaestus pointed his wrench at the glowing joint connecting the engine to the track. "Specifically, the flux regulator. If I shatter the induction coil while the engine is revving, the magnetic field collapses. The train becomes dead weight. And then friction does the rest," Hephaestus said, a grim determination setting in. "It'll grind to a halt, but I have to be close to do it. I need to hit the regulator manually." "Then go." Damien drew his sword, the shadow mana swirling around the blade. "I'll keep the guards off your back. You break the toy." Hephaestus nodded. He took a deep breath, slammed his visor down, and jumped. "Oh yeah." The platform. Clang. Hephaestus landed on top of a stack of munitions crates on the loading dock. The heavy thud of his boots drew instant attention. "Who goes there?" a twilight cultist shouted, spinning around. "Plumbing," Hephaestus roared. He leaped from the crate, swinging his wrench with both hands. Crack! He didn't aim for the cultist. He aimed for the high-pressure steam valve on the pipe next to the cultist. The pipe ruptured. A jet of superheated white steam blasted out at 300 psi, catching the cultist full in the face. Arghhh, the cultist screamed, dropping his staff as the heat blinded him. Intruder! The alarm wasn't raised yet, but the guards, 3 cyborgs and 2 more cultists, turned toward the commotion. Kill the dwarf! A cyborg raised its arm cannon, the barrel glowing red. Shing. Before it could fire, a spike of solid darkness erupted from the cyborg's own shadow, piercing its power core from below. The machine shuddered and collapsed, sparks flying. High above on the balcony, Damien stood with one hand extended, his shadow arts dancing around his fingers. "Eyes on the objective, Prince," Damien shouted. "I've got your 6. Hephaestus didn't look up. He trusted Damien. He scrambled across the platform, sliding under the wild swing of a cultist's sword. He kicked the cultist in the shin with his steel-toed boot, shattering the bone, and kept running toward the front of the train. "The flux regulator," Hephaestus muttered, his engineer's eyes locking onto a small, glowing room plate at the front wheel assembly. "It's shielded." He reached the front of the locomotive. The engine was roaring, the levitation field beginning to hum. The train lurched forward. A massive cyborg, larger than the others, a heavy loader model blocked his path. It raised a hydraulic fist to crush the prince. "Out of my way," Hephaestus shouted. He didn't try to fight it. He pulled a small, spherical device from his belt, an overloaded mana capacitor he had swiped from Brock's table a few days ago. He slid between the cyborg's legs and slapped the device onto its knee joint. Beep boom! The joint exploded. The cyborg toppled over, its legs sheared off by the shaped charge. Hephaestus scrambled past the falling giant and slammed his wrench onto the glowing blue induction coil. "Artificer Art, dismantle." He channeled his mana into the wrench. The tool glowed white. Crunch! He didn't just hit the metal, he broke the enchantment holding it together. The coil shattered. The blue light died instantly. Screch. The magnetic field vanished. The massive iron engine, suddenly subjected to gravity, slammed down onto the concrete sleeper. Sparks showered the platform like fireworks. The momentum carried it forward, grinding against the stone with a sound like a dying dragon. The metal screamed. "Hold on," Damien yelled, shadow stepping down from the balcony to grab Hephaestus by the collar. Damien pulled the prince back just as the engine jumped the track. Crash! The locomotive smashed into the control booth, demolishing it in a cloud of dust and debris. The cargo cars behind it jackknifed, slamming into each other with deafening thuds, but they stayed upright. The train had stopped. "Ooh, yeah." The evacuation. Silence returned to the cavern for a split second, followed immediately by the wailing of sirens. WOP, WOP, WOP. Red emergency lights began to flash, bathing the cavern in a blood-colored glow. "Alert, transport sector compromised. Lockdown initiated." "We tripped the silent alarm," Damien said, dusting off his cloak. "We have maybe 10 minutes before the warden floods this room with neurotoxin." Hephaestus didn't care about the gas. He scrambled over the wreckage of the engine and ran to the first cargo cage. "Open, damn it, open." He smashed the electronic lock with his wrench until the casing cracked. He ripped the wires out, hot-wiring the door mechanism with trembling fingers. Click! The cage door swung open. Inside, the dwarves were huddled in terror. They flinched as the masked figure reached in. "Don't hurt us," an old woman cried, shielding a child. "I'm not going to hurt you," Hephaestus said, pulling his goggles up. He looked at them, his eyes wet with tears and soot. "I'm sorry I'm late." Prince Hephaestus," the old woman gasped. It's the prince. He came for us. From the back of the cage, a small figure pushed forward. It was Thorn, the boy from the alley. He was clutching his broken toy. You came back, Thorn whispered, recognizing the wrench. You saved us. Hephaestus looked at the boy. He looked at the hundreds of terrified faces in the other cages. I promised, Hephaestus said, his voice thick with emotion. He turned to Damien. Damien, the vents. The airflow is reversed in emergency mode. If we send them up the intake shaft we came down, the updraft will help them climb. It's the only way out. It's a 500-meter climb, Damien warned. They are dwarves, Hephaestus said fiercely. We are born in the rock, they can make it, but we need to buy them time. Damien nodded. He pointed to the massive blast doors at the far end of the platform. They were beginning to groan as the warden's reinforcements tried to force them open. Get them to the shaft, Damien ordered. I will seal the entrance behind them. Once they are safe, we go for the sword. Hephaestus nodded. He turned to the prisoners, his voice projecting with newfound authority. Everyone, listen to me. Move to the ventilation shaft. Climb until you see the sky. Go. As the civilians scrambled out of the cages, helping each other toward the maintenance ladder, Hephaestus looked back at the burning wreck of the train. He looked at the hologram projector, which was now flickering with static. My uncle called them fuel, Hephaestus spat, gripping his wrench. He looked at the blast doors where the enemy was coming. He wants power, the prince's eyes hardened. I'm going to show him what happens when you overload the system. Damien smirked. The timid engineer was gone. Good, Damien said, his dual core humming as he prepared for the next fight. Let's go rob your father. Yeah. Meanwhile, Team B. The cell block. KLANG. Leona kicked the heavy iron door of the cell block entrance. It flew off its hinges, crushing a cyborg guard against the wall. Did you hear that? Leona grinned, her ears twitching as the distant sirens began to wail. The young lord started the party. Brock racked the slide of his massive monorifle. Then we better not be late, Brock growled. Isabel, heat up the room. Lyra, shoot anything that doesn't have a beard. Aye, Grandmaster. They charged into the prison block. The riot had begun, KLANG. The heavy iron door of the cell block flew off its hinges, warping around the impact of a steam-pressurized fist. It sailed across the room, crushing a cyborg guard against the far wall with a sickening crunch of metal on metal. Did you hear that? Leona grinned, stepping through the smoke, her lion ears twitching as the distant sirens from the transport sector began to wail. The young lord started the party. Grandmaster Brock racked the slide of his massive, custom-built monorifle. The weapon hummed with a dangerous, unstable blue light. Then we better not be late, Brock growled, spitting on the floor. Isabel, heat up the room. Lyra, shoot anything that doesn't have a beard. Aye, Grandmaster. They charged into the prison block. Oh yeah. Cell Block A, general population. The main hall was a nightmare of cages and catwalks suspended over the magma vents. The air smelled of sulfur and unwashed bodies. Intruders detected, a mechanical voice blared. Engage. A squad of Iron Legionnaires, hulking suits of animated armor powered by enslaved souls, marched onto the bridge blocking their path. They raised heavy riot shields and monobatons. Shield wall, the Legion commander shouted. Shield this, Leona roared. She didn't stop. She activated the steam impact gauntlets Brock had given her. The vents on her knuckles hissed, releasing white plumes of steam as pressure built up to critical levels. Beast Art steam hammer. She punched the center of the shield wall. Boom! The explosion wasn't just physical, it was pneumatic. The shockwave shattered the first rank of shields and sent 3 heavy armored constructs flying off the bridge, plummeting into the lava below. Fire, Brock shouted. He didn't aim, he just pulled the trigger. Thump, thump, thump. His rifle fired condensed slugs of volatile mana. They didn't pierce armor, they detonated on impact. Explosions rocked the walkway, cyborg limbs flew. Left flank, Lyra called out, her eyes glowing green as she spotted snipers appearing on the upper catwalks. She drew her phantom bow. She didn't use normal arrows. She pulled out the black-fletched ones Brock had given her. Flashbang volley. Twang, twang, twang. The arrows hit the walls near the snipers. They didn't kill. They burst into blinding spheres of magnesium-white light and deafening sonic screeches. SCRECH. The cyborg snipers, whose optical sensors were tuned for the dark, reeled back, blinded and disoriented. Isabel now, Lyra signaled. Isabel walked onto the bridge. She looked at the blinded snipers. She looked at the panicked guards rushing them. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scorching air of the prison. Gravity down. She clapped her hands. The catwalks above groaned. The blinded snipers suddenly became 10 times heavier. The metal grating couldn't hold them. Crash. The upper walkway collapsed, raining debris and broken bots down onto the main bridge, crushing the remaining reinforcements. Efficient, Brock grunted, kicking a severed robot head out of his way. Keep moving. The high-security wing is past the processing center. The processing center. They pushed deeper. The resistance grew stiffer, but Team B was a wrecking ball. However, as they entered the processing center, the mood shifted from adrenaline to horror. This wasn't a cell block, it was a workshop. Tables were lined with restraints. Magical saws and drills hung from the ceiling, and in the corner, piles of discarded dwarven armor and clothes lay in heaps. But the worst part was the soul separator. A glass tube filled with swirling blue mist was connected to a chair. A dwarf sat in the chair, his eyes glassy, drool running down his beard. He was alive, but he wasn't there. It looked like his soul had left his body completely. They're lobotomizing them, Leona whispered, her rage faltering for a second as the cruelty of it hit her. They're taking their minds to put into the machines. Brock walked up to the chair. He looked at the dwarf. It was a young smith he had taught to hold a hammer 20 years ago. Corgan, Brock whispered. The dwarf didn't respond. He just stared at the wall. Brock's hand trembled. He reached out and gently closed the dwarf's eyes. Then he turned to the console controlling the machine. He raised his rifle butt and smashed it. Crash, crash, crash. He smashed it until it was sparks and scrap. Thrain, Brock growled, his voice low and vibrating with a fury that made even Leona step back. I'm going to pull your spine out through your throat. Grandmaster, Lyra whispered, pointing to a heavy blast door at the end of the room. Mana signatures, weak, but they're definitely in there. Brock took a breath. He composed himself, though his mechanical eye was whirring erratically. Leona, open it. Leona nodded. She walked to the blast door. She didn't use technique. She grabbed the edges with her claws and pulled. SCRECH. The metal tore. Lin Ye. High security cell 1. The room beyond was dark. Chained to the wall, suspended by anti-mana shackles, was an old dwarf. He was emaciated, his once-proud beard singed and patchy. His skin was gray from lack of sunlight and food. Master Orin of the blast furnace. Orin lifted his head weakly as the light from the hallway spilled in. He squinted, his eyes adjusting. Brock, Orin rasped, his voice like sandpaper. Is that you, or have I finally cracked? It's me, you stubborn old mule. Brock walked in, cutting the chains with a laser cutter built into his multi-tool. Orin fell into Brock's arms. He was light, too light. You fool, Orin coughed, clutching Brock's coat. Why did you come? The warden Krage, he's a monster. He'll turn you into one of them. Let him try, Brock said, helping his friend sit up. I didn't come alone, and I didn't come to mourn. Brock looked at the other cells lining the hall. Mistress Keita, General Thorger, they were all there. Broken, starved, hopeless. Oren shook his head. It's too late, Brock, we can't fight. We can barely stand, leave us, save yourself. Brock looked at his friend. He looked at the despair in their eyes. Then he slapped Oren, hard. Smack. The sound echoed in the silent cell. Oren blinked, stunned. Did you hear that? Brock shouted, his voice booming. That was the sound of me waking you up. Brock stood up. He kicked open the massive spatial bag he had been carrying on his back. Clatter. Dozens of heavy, gleaming weapons spilled out onto the stone floor. They weren't swords, they were Magitech rifles, steam cannons, rune blades. I didn't come here to rescue prisoners, Brock roared, picking up a heavy cannon and shoving it into Oren's chest. I came here to recruit soldiers. He looked at the starving dwarves in the cells. Thrain stole your freedom. He stole your dignity. He stole your craft. Are you going to rot here? Or are you going to pick up a gun and remind that usurper who built this damn city? Oren looked at the cannon in his hands. He felt the hum of the mana core. It felt familiar. It felt like power. Slowly, the despair in Oren's eyes faded, replaced by a spark of the old fire. A fire that demanded vengeance. Oren gripped the cannon. He used it to pull himself to his feet. Oren's voice cracked, then hardened. I need ammo. Brock grinned, a savage, toothy expression. Top shelf, high explosive. Good, Oren racked the slide. The cannon whined as it charged up. Let's go kill the warden. Meanwhile, different from Isabel and the others who were about to have their first battle, Damien and Hephaestus had already had theirs. Crash. The wreckage of the maglev train burned with a sickly, magical fire. Smoke billowed up into the high ceiling of the transport cavern, obscuring the blinking red emergency lights. Go, keep climbing, don't look down. Hephaestus stood at the base of the ventilation shaft, ushering the last of the prisoners onto the maintenance ladder. His face was streaked with soot, his apron torn, but his voice carried the weight of command. Prince, the boy Thorn hesitated on the ladder, looking back. Aren't you coming? I have to finish this, Hephaestus said, forcing a smile he didn't feel. Go, tell the world what happened here. He slammed the maintenance grate shut and fused it with a quick pulse of mana from his wrench. His seal. The civilians were safe. They would climb the updraft to the surface. That leaves us, Damien said, stepping out of the shadows of the train wreckage. He wiped a smudge of oil from his cheek. He looked around the massive cavern. It was empty. The cultists they had fought earlier had fled when the train derailed. The cyborgs lay broken on the platform. It's quiet, Damien noted, his eyes narrowing. Too quiet. The alarm is blaring, but no reinforcements are coming through the main blast doors. That doesn't make sense, Hephaestus muttered, adjusting his goggles. Warden Krog wouldn't just let us walk away, unless... The prince froze. He looked at the shadows dancing in the smoke. Unless he deployed a hunter. Shing. A sound of tearing metal echoed, right next to Damien's ear. Damien reacted on pure instinct. He threw his body backward, activating Shadow Step. Splat! A deep gash appeared in the floor where he had been standing a millisecond ago. Sparks flew. But there was no one there. Invisible, Damien shouted, raising his sword. Isabel and the others aren't here to help, this time it's only us. It's a void stalker, Hephaestus screamed, backing up against the wrecked engine. It's an assassin construct. It uses phase shift technology to exist between dimensions. You can't hit it if it's not fully here. Whoosh! The air shimmered behind Hephaestus. A translucent, mantis-like blade materialized from thin air, swinging for the prince's neck. Get down, Damien lunged. He didn't try to block the blade. He tackled Hephaestus. They rolled across the platform just as the blade sliced through the thick iron plating of the train engine like it was butter. They scrambled to their feet, back to back. "I can't see it," Damien grit his teeth. His shadow sense was useless. The enemy wasn't casting a shadow because it wasn't physically present in this dimension. And if I can't see it, I can't kill it. "Phase shift," Hephaestus muttered, his hands trembling as he fumbled with his multi-tool. "It tracks mana signatures. It locks onto the heat of your core." "Can you fix it?" "I can't fix it," Hephaestus snapped, twisting a dial on his own goggles. "But I can fix you." The prince grabbed Damien's face. "Hold still." Hephaestus jammed his multi-tool against the side of Damien's head. He wasn't attacking, he was hacking. He channeled his mana into a localized artificer spell. Ocular overwrite, spectral frequency. Zap! Damien felt a sharp sting in his eyes, followed by a rush of mana flooding his optic nerves. The world shifted, the smoke vanished. The burning train turned into a wireframe of heat signatures. And there, standing 10 meters away, was a distortion. It looked like a glitch in reality. A tall, lanky mechanical skeleton made of glass and smoke, crouched on top of a crate. Its mana core pulsed with a cold, pale blue light. "Void Stalker Prototype Unit." "I see it," Damien grinned. The world looked like a blueprint, and the enemy was glowing bright red against the blue background. The stalker screeched a sound like grinding glass and leaped. It moved fast, phasing through the wreckage. "It's coming left," Hephaestus shouted, though Damien didn't need the warning anymore. Damien waited. He held his sword low. The stalker lunged, its phase blade aiming for Damien's heart. "You can hide in the void," Damien whispered, his dual core flaring. "But you can't hide from a king." Golden Dragon Art, Solar Flare. Using a combination of his fire ability and Golden Dragon aura, Damien attacked. He didn't randomly swing. Instead, he released a burst of pure, blinding, burning golden aura from his body. The intense light and heat disrupted the delicate phase shift magic. ZZZRT. The stalker flickered. For a second, it was forced back into the physical realm, its glass armor becoming solid. That was all Damien needed. Shadow Art Sever. He swung his sword in a brutal upward arc. Crunch! The blade bit into the solid metal of the stalker's midsection. The machine shrieked as it was cut in half. The upper torso flew spinning into the air, while the legs collapsed. Damien spun and drove his sword into the stalker's head as it hit the ground. The blue light in its eyes died. "Target neutralized," Damien exhaled, the spectral vision fading as Hephaestus's spell wore off. Hephaestus slumped against a crate, wiping grease and sweat from his forehead. That was a prototype. Thrain must be emptying the labs. "He probably knows that we're here." "Good," Damien said, kicking the scrap metal. "That means he's scared." He looked across the cavern. The path was clear. At the far end, behind a curtain of falling lava, was a massive, ornate door marked with the crest of the twin hammers. "The Royal Vault." "Is that it?" Damien asked. "That's it." Hephaestus stood up, clutching his wrench. "The sword is inside, and if Brock is right, it's the only thing that can stop the Warden." Damien checked his status. Mana 70%, aura 75%. "Then let's go get your father's legacy." They walked toward the lava fall. Meanwhile, the cell block. The butcher's playground. Brock, Leona, Lyra, and Isabel stood at the entrance to the next sector. The floor was sticky with drying blood. The air was thick with the smell of rusted iron and antiseptic. Hanging from the ceiling were cages filled with bones. "The torture wing," Brock spat, his grip tightening on his rifle. "The Warden's favorite playground." A heavy, wet footstep echoed from the darkness ahead. Thump squelch. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was enormous, easily 8 feet tall. It wore a butcher's apron made of stitched leather or perhaps skin. Its face was hidden behind a welding mask. But its hands had been replaced by massive, spinning buzz saws that whirred with a menacing, high-pitched hum. The butcher. Visitors, the butcher wheezed, its voice wet and gurgling. More parts. Leona stepped forward. She smashed her steam gauntlets together. HISSS. I call dibs, Leona growled, her berserk aura flaring red. I've been wanting to punch something ugly all day. Brock nodded. He's all yours, lass. We'll secure the exit. Leona roared and charged. The butcher raised his saws. The brawl began. VRRRRRTGTGVRRRR. The sound vibrated in their teeth, a high-pitched mechanical scream that bounced off the cold stone walls of the torture wing. The butcher didn't rush. He stood in the center of the hallway, a mountain of stitched skin and rusted metal. He revved the gasoline engine strapped to his back, sending a cloud of oily, black smoke choking into the narrow corridor. The circular saws replacing his hands spun into a blur of silver death. Behind Leona, Grandmaster Brock stood protectively in front of the open cell doors. He wasn't alone. Master Orin, gaunt and pale but eyes burning with vengeance, clutched the heavy Magitech cannon Brock had given him. Behind them, supported by Isabel, were the other 2 legends of the Ironclan, Mistress Kida, the rune scribe, and General Thorger, the commander of heavy infantry. They were weak, starved, and barely conscious, but they were alive. He's blocking the exit, Brock growled, his mechanical eye whirring as it calculated the butcher's armor density. And that plating is reinforced star metal scrap. It's the same alloy we use for the blast doors. Then I'll knock gently, Leona grinned, stepping forward. She didn't just step, she prowled. Her golden eyes dilated, locking onto the machine. The berserk aura seeped from her pores like red mist, coating her brass armor in a spectral, blood-colored film. Careful, lass, Orin rasped, racking the slide of his cannon. That saw will cut through bone like butter. I know, Leona whispered. That's the fun part. Roar. The butcher lunged. For a creature so massive, he moved with terrifying hydraulic speed. He swung his right arm, a horizontal slash aimed to decapitate Leona in one stroke. Leona, knowing she couldn't block it, instantly dropped. Whoosh! The saw blade sliced the air where her neck had been a millisecond ago, the wind from its rotation cutting a few strands of her mane. Time seemed to slow. Leona, crouched low, saw the sparks flying from the butcher's joints. She smelled the oil and the old blood. She slid under his guard, the sparks from his blade showering over her back. She planted her foot and exploded upward. Bang! She drove her right fist into the butcher's exposed stomach. The piston in her steam impact gauntlet fired on contact. A plume of white steam hissed out violently. The butcher staggered back a step, black oil leaking from a dent in his midsection. But he didn't fall. He didn't even flinch. Tickle, the butcher gurgled through his rusted vox box. He raised both arms high. The engines on his back roared to maximum output. Mince of meat. He brought both saws down in a crushing pincer movement, intending to scissor Leona between the spinning blades. Leona, move, Lyra shouted from the back, knocking a phantom arrow. No, Leona barked, her voice echoing with primal authority. Don't interfere. She didn't dodge. She planted her boots into the stone floor, cracking the tiles. She raised her hands. She caught them. S-R-E-E-C-H. The sound was agonizing, metal screaming against metal. Leona had grabbed the flat sides of the circular saws with her gauntleted palms. The spinning teeth bit into the reinforced brass knuckles of her armor, grinding furiously. Sparks erupted in a blinding fountain, illuminating the dark hallway in strobes of orange and yellow. It was a contest of nature versus machine. the hydraulic torque of the construct against the biological hydraulics of a beastkin. "You weak," the butcher laughed, his weight bearing down. Leona's knees bent. The floor beneath her feet shattered, sinking inches into the foundation. The spinning blades were inches from her face, the heat from the friction singeing her eyebrows. "She can't hold that," Thorger rumbled weakly from the back, trying to stand. "Brock, help her." "Wait," Brock lowered his rifle with a hand. He watched the red mist around Leona thicken into a solid, roaring flame. "Your young lord didn't pick a soldier, he picked a monster. Watch." Leona's arms trembled violently. Her muscles bulged, tearing the sleeves of her tunic. But she wasn't grimacing, she was smiling. "Weak," she whispered. Thump thump. Her heart beat like a war drum. The berserk aura spiked, flooding her veins with adrenaline and mana. "I am the vanguard of the young master." She squeezed. Crunch. The sound of warping metal cut through the whine of the saws. The butcher's mechanical eyes widened. The saw blades stopped spinning. With a roar of exertion, Leona crushed the mechanisms. The steel blades shattered, sending shrapnel flying into the walls like shuriken. The butcher stood there, his primary weapons destroyed, his motors smoking. "My turn," Leona snarled. She released the broken blades. She grabbed the butcher by the straps of his leather apron and pulled him down to her level. Clang! She headbutted him. The butcher's welding mask caved in. He stumbled back, his equilibrium shattered. Leona didn't let him fall. She pulled back her right fist. The vents on her gauntlet hissed, building pressure. The gauge on her wrist spun into the red zone. Steam hammer. She punched him directly in the face. Kaboom! The explosion was deafening. A shockwave of steam and force blew the welding mask, and the head behind it clean off the butcher's shoulders. The metal head flew down the hallway, bouncing off the far wall with a hollow clang. The massive, headless body stood there for a second, oil spurting from the neck like a geyser, before toppling backwards with a heavy, earth-shaking crash. Silence returned to the hallway, broken only by the hissing of Leona's cooling gauntlets. She stood over the corpse, panting heavily, the red light in her eyes slowly fading back to gold. She shook the black oil off her armor. "That felt good," she muttered. "By the ancestors." Master Orin lowered his cannon, staring at the girl. She crushed star metal with her grip. "Like I said," Brock grinned, his mechanical eye whirring. "Talent." Brock limped forward, stepping over the wreckage. He reached down to the butcher's belt and ripped off a heavy, blood-stained ring of keys. "The exit is clear," Brock said, turning to the group. He looked at Kida and Thorger, who were leaning against the wall, watching the scene with renewed hope. "We aren't done," Brock said, tossing a smaller key to Isabel. "Isabel, get those shackles off the General and Mistress Kida. We need everyone moving." "Yes," Isabel rushed to help the other prisoners. Brock looked at the heavy blast door at the end of the hall, the one the butcher had been guarding. "The armory is just past that door," Brock said grimly. "Thrain confiscated all our tools, Thorger's shield, Kida's staff, Orin's hammer. They are all in there." "Then let's get them back," Leona said, cracking her knuckles. "We have an army to build." Damien's voice seemed to echo in their minds through the contract. Brock racked the slide of his rifle. "Let's go get our gear." The heavy blast door groaned as Brock forced it open, the gears grinding against years of rust and neglect. Inside, the air was stale and cold. It wasn't a cell, it was a vault. Thrain hadn't destroyed the tools of the guild masters. He was too greedy for that. He had locked them away like trophies, displayed on racks under the harsh light of mana lamps. "My shield." General Thorger, a dwarf who looked like a mountain carved from granite, stumbled forward. He was emaciated, his skin gray from months of starvation in the dark cells, supported by Isabel's shoulder. But as his eyes landed on the massive slab of metal in the center of the room, his strength seemed to return. It was a tower shield tall enough to cover 2 men. It wasn't made of iron or steel. It was forged from adamantite, the hardest metal in the earth, and etched with the crest of the ironclad, a hammer striking an anvil. The bulwark of the mountain. Thorger reached out with a trembling hand. The moment his fingers brushed the cold metal, a low, resonant hum filled the room. VOOM. The shield recognized its master. "I thought I would never hold you again," Thorger whispered, his voice cracking. "Stop getting sentimental, you old rock," Brock grunted, though his own mechanical eye was whirring softly. He walked to a glass case on the right. Inside floated a staff made of whitewood, tipped with a floating, rotating rune cube. The scribe's logic. "Mistress Kida," Brock smashed the glass with the butt of his rifle. "Wake up." Kida, the rune scribe, leaned against the doorframe. She looked frail, her intricate braids matted and messy, but her eyes were sharp. She walked over and took the staff. Zap! Blue lightning arced from the tip, illuminating the dark room. The runes on her robes, which had been dormant and dull, suddenly flared to life, glowing with azure power. "The calibration is off," Kida muttered, her fingers dancing over the rotating cube. "Thrain's technicians must have tried to reverse engineer it. Amateurs." "Can you use it?" Leona asked, watching the display of mana with awe. "I can use it to rewrite the security protocols of this entire prison," Kida said, a cruel smile touching her lips. "Give me 5 minutes." "We don't have 5 minutes," Master Orin interrupted from the doorway. He was holding the heavy Magitech cannon Brock had given him earlier, peering down the hallway they had just come from. "Do you hear that? Thump, thump, thump." It wasn't a regular heartbeat. It was the sound of synchronized, heavy marching, hundreds of boots hitting the metal floor in perfect unison. The floor plates vibrated, dust fell from the ceiling. "The Iron Legion," Lyra hissed, knocking a phantom arrow. "They're here." Brock racked the slide of his rifle. "Thrain's toy soldiers, cyborgs made from the corpses of our brothers." He looked at Thorger, Kida, and Orin. "Well, you have your weapons. Are you going to stand there and mourn the dead, or are you going to avenge them?" Thorger grabbed the handle of his massive shield. He didn't lift it, he hefted it. The muscles in his back bulged, snapping the tattered remains of his prison shirt. He turned around. The gray, defeated look was gone from his eyes. In its place was the fire of a general who had held the line against dragons. "Brock," Thorger rumbled, his voice deepening like an earthquake. "Do you have any mana stimulants?" "Top shelf," Brock tossed him a red vial. "Adrenaline and liquid mana. It'll hurt like hell tomorrow." "Good." Thorger crushed the vial in his teeth and swallowed the glass and liquid together. Roar! A golden aura exploded from his body. His skin flushed with color. He slammed the bottom of his shield onto the floor. Clang! "Ironclad," Thorger shouted, his voice amplified by the mana. "Form UP." It wasn't just a request, it was an order. A Grandmaster's will to defy the norm. Behind him, the dozen other prisoners they had freed, smiths, soldiers, engineers, they all straightened their spines. They grabbed whatever weapons were in the armory, hammers, axes, prototype rifles. They weren't prisoners anymore, they were the old guard. "To the bridge," Thorger commanded. "We hold the line for the prince." "They?" "The Bridge of Tears." The group charged out of the torture wing and onto the main suspension bridge that connected the high-security sector to the central hub. And there, waiting for them, was the enemy. The far side of the bridge was a wall of black steel. 200 Iron Legionnaires. They stood 7 feet tall, completely encased in steam-powered armor. Their faces were hidden behind faceless iron masks with glowing red islets. They held massive riot shields and mana pikes crackling with electricity. Target identified, the Legion commander's mechanical voice boomed. Prisoners, terminate. Fire. The front rank of the Legion knelt. The rank behind them raised mana rifles. Pew pew pew. A volley of blue mana bolts, dense enough to punch through stone, rained down on the bridge. Behind me, Thorgar roared. He didn't stop, he charged. He planted his massive shield in front of him and ran straight into the hail of gunfire. Ping ping clang. The mana bullet struck the adamantite shield and ricocheted harmlessly. Thorgar was a moving fortress. Isabel now, Lyra shouted. Gravity field. Isabel clapped her hands. A purple dome appeared over the Legion's formation. Crunch. The Legionnaires buckled. Their heavy steam armor, usually an advantage, became a cage as gravity increased fivefold. The metal groaned. Orin, light them up, Brock yelled. Master Orin stepped out from behind Thorgar's shield. He leveled his heavy triple-barreled cannon. Eat this, you scrappy bastards. Thump, thump, thump. The cannon roared. High-explosive mana shells arced over the bridge and slammed into the clustered Legionnaires. Boom, boom. Metal limbs flew. The perfect formation was shattered. Charge, Leona screamed, leaping over Thorgar's head. She landed in the middle of the chaotic Legion lines. Her berserk aura flared red. She punched a Legionnaire so hard his chest plate caved in and exited through his back. For the young master, Leona laughed, spinning and decapitating another with a backhand. Mistress Kida stood at the back, waving her staff. She wasn't attacking the soldiers. She was attacking the bridge itself. Rune of stabilization, invert. The runes glowing on the enemy's side of the bridge turned red. Snap. The support cables on the far end snapped. The bridge tilted violently. The Legionnaires, already heavy and under gravity pressure, lost their footing. Dozens of them slid off the edge, falling screaming into the magma vents hundreds of meters below. We have the momentum, Brock shouted, firing his rifle with one hand. Push them back to the central junction. They were a whirlwind of destruction. A tank, a berserker, a sniper, a demon, and an army of angry smiths. But just as they reached the end of the bridge, a siren wailed. Warning, Warden Krog engaging. Threat level extreme. The blast doors at the end of the bridge didn't open. They melted. A beam of purple void energy punched through the thick steel door like it was wet paper. And stepping through the molten hole was a nightmare. Warden Krog. He ignored the Legionnaires. He ignored the riot. He looked directly at Brock. Grandmaster, Krog gurgled, his spider legs clicking on the metal floor. You are late for your execution. He raised his arm cannon. The void core in his chest pulsed. Get down, Thorgar screamed, raising his shield. VWWOOM. A massive beam of void energy engulfed the bridge. VWWOOM. The sound was absolute. It swallowed the roar of the magma vents and the screams of the falling Legionnaires. A beam of pure, concentrated void energy, thick as a tree trunk and dark as a starless night, erupted from Warden Krog's arm cannon. Hold, General Thorgar roared. He didn't try to dodge. On a suspension bridge, there is nowhere to dodge. He slammed the bulwark of the mountain into the floor plates, crouching behind the massive slab of adamantite. Boom! The beam collided with the shield. The impact was terrifying. Thorgar's boots dug furrows into the metal deck as he was pushed back inch by inch. The adamantite groaned, glowing red-hot from the friction of the void energy trying to erase it. He's heavy, Thorgar gritted out, veins bulging on his neck. Even with the monostimulants, his emaciated body was screaming. Keep it steady, you old rock, Brock shouted, taking cover behind Thorgar. Brock leaned out and fired his Magitech rifle. Bang, bang. The high-explosive shells hit Krog's void shield and dissipated like smoke. It's useless, Master Orin yelled, his triple-barrel cannon spinning down to cool. He has a void core. He has infinite mana shielding. We can't scratch him with standard munitions. Krog walked forward while firing. His spider legs clicked methodically on the metal. He wasn't running. He was advancing like an inevitable death. Resistance is inefficient, Krog gurgled. He increased the output. The beam widened. Arg, Thorger fell to one knee. The heat was scorching his skin. I can't hold it forever. We don't need forever. Mistress Kita stepped forward, her eyes glowing azure. She slammed her staff onto the bridge deck. Rune of Isolation, sever. Crack. She didn't attack Krog. She attacked the bridge itself. 10 meters in front of Thorger, the metal floor plates suddenly sheared clean off. The bridge snapped in half. The section Krog was standing on swung downward, plummeting toward the magma. Gravity push, Isabel added, slamming her hands down to accelerate Krog's fall. Krog's beam cut off as he fell into the abyss. Did we get him? Leona asked, peering over the edge of the broken bridge. Clank. A massive, mechanical claw shot up from the darkness, grabbing the jagged edge of the bridge where Team B stood. Then another leg, then another. Krog hauled himself up from the vertical drop, his spider legs piercing the steel like parchment. He hung off the edge of the bridge, staring up at them with glowing purple eyes. Annoying insects. Run, Brock shouted. Fall back to the central junction. We just need to buy the kid time. The royal vault. While the battle raged above, Damien and Hephaestus stood before the massive, ornate doors of the royal vault. The air here was blistering. They were deep, right next to the planet's core. The lava fall roared behind them, a curtain of liquid fire. This is it, Hephaestus whispered, holding the rusted keycard. My father's sanctuary. He slotted the card. Hiss clunk. The gears turned. The doors, made of a metal Damien didn't recognize, slowly swung inward. They stepped inside. It wasn't a treasure room filled with gold like the dragon's tomb. It was a workshop. Tools of unimaginable quality lay scattered on tables. Blueprints covered the walls. And in the center of the room, suspended above a pit of pure, white-hot magical fire, was an anvil. And stuck in the anvil was it. The Pantheon, Damien breathed. It didn't look like a regular sword. It looked like a mistake. It was a jagged shard of translucent crystal, roughly shaped like a blade. It shifted colors constantly, red, blue, green, black, vomiting sparks of chaotic energy into the air. It looked unstable, dangerous, like a bomb waiting to go off. It's broken, Damien said, walking closer. The heat radiating from it was intense enough to burn his skin even through the thermal regulator. Not broken, Hephaestus corrected, walking to a console and frantically typing in commands. Unfinished. The prince looked at the weapon with a mix of awe and fear. My father wanted to create a weapon that could channel any energy. Mana, aura, void, life. He wanted a universal conductor. But he couldn't create a filter, Hephaestus explained, pointing to the chaotic sparks. The blade has zero resistance. It drinks energy instantly, but it can't regulate the output. If you pour fire into it, it releases all of it in a millisecond explosion. If you pour aura, it shatters your arm. It's a parasite, Hephaestus grimaced. It sucks the user dry and then detonates. That's why he locked it away. He couldn't solve the stabilization circuit. Damien looked at the sword. A weapon that drinks everything. A weapon with zero resistance. In the hands of a normal mage, it was suicide. But Damien wasn't normal. He was a dual core. He had two infinite oceans of opposing power fighting inside him constantly. Unlike others, he didn't need a regulator, he needed a vent. It's perfect, Damien whispered. Damien, don't, Hephaestus warned. If you touch that without the stabilization rune, it will eat your soul. We don't have time to be safe, Prince, Damien said. Boom! The ceiling of the vault shook, dust fell. Warning, the automated voice of the facility blared. Warden Krog has breached the perimeter. Arrival in 30 seconds. He's coming, Damien said. He stepped onto the walkway leading to the anvil. Hephaestus, get your tools ready. Why? Because when I grab this thing, Damien looked back, his eyes flashing gold and black. I'm going to need you to fix it while I'm using it. Are you insane? Hephaestus screamed. Fieldsmithing a divine weapon during combat, that's impossible. You're the genius who built a Gundam out of scrap, Damien smirked. Improvise. Damien reached out. His hand closed around the hilt of the Pantheon sword. Zap! IRGHHHHH. Damien screamed. A sudden feeling of emptiness overwhelmed his very being. In an instant, the sword drained 50% of his mana, then 80%. Then it started eating his aura, then his blood. The blade turned a violent, screaming purple. System alert. Foreign object detected. Energy drain critical. The weapon is rejecting the host. Reject me. Damien gritted his teeth, forcing his will into the blade. Although I might not be the original protagonist, but I am someone destined to surpass him. How dare a mere sword, not mentioned in the original plot, reject me? He pulled. Scrape. The sword slid an inch out of the anvil. The entire room shook. Crash. The blast doors of the vault exploded inward. Debris flew everywhere. Hephaestus dove behind a workbench. Through the smoke, a massive mechanical spider leg slammed onto the floor. Warden Krog. He dragged his massive bulk into the room. He was damaged, scorch marks from Oren's cannon, dents from Leona's fists, but his void core was pulsing stronger than ever. He ignored Hephaestus. He ignored the anvil. His glowing purple eyes locked onto Damien. Found you, Krog gurgled. He raised his arm cannon. The void energy began to charge. Damien stood there, one hand on the sword that was trying to kill him, facing a fifth-order monster. Hey, ugly, Damien wheezed, blood dripping from his nose. He ripped the Pantheon sword free from the anvil. It was just a jagged shard of glass, leaking chaotic energy. Do you want to dance? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down.